All good? Perfect. So thank you for those that came out today. I know it's a little snowy outside, but welcome to the Nonprofit Leadership Career Week panel. We have 4 different guests with us today. Just before we get started, I do ask that you put your cell phones away and turn them off or turn the ringer off. That way they don't disturb us during the panel. As well as if you are participating in the Learning Passport program, you would have been given a survey, or you will be given a survey later, that you do need to complete both sides. There's a mandatory part of the survey as well as an optional part, so just make sure that you fill it out as entirely as you'd like, as well as we'll be stamping the learning passports at the end of the panel. All right, so our first question is, please briefly describe the organization you work for and your position. And we'll start on my left.
Okay. So my name is Heather. I work for the McPhee Center for Creative Learning in downtown Dartmouth. We've worked with the Mount a few times in overlap, and if anyone knows Kenny Fitzpatrick, he sits on our board. So we work with youth 12 to 19, so junior high and high, or folks who may or may not finish high school. And support them through creativity. So we work with youth who are disengaged from the traditional learning environment, maybe not have enough food at the table, or maybe just don't like school for whatever reason, had a poor teacher in grade 6 and just turned them off the whole thing. Or maybe not enough caring adults in their life to push them and get them to class. So knowing that some of the ways that youth express themselves at that age may not be the cause, and maybe a symptom of greater things. So we work with creativity to help bridge that gap. And some of it's mental health services, caring adults, showing a lot of love, and food. So all of our programs are free of charge, and they rotate around performance and visual arts. You're up.
Thank you. I want to join. My name is Perl. I'm the executive director of Prescott. We're located in the north end of Halifax. And at Prescott, we serve the needs of adults with an intellectual challenge in Halifax. Think of the old Halifax and the peninsula, out to Bedford and Tantallon. Currently we have 162 adults that we serve on a daily basis. We have a staff of 41, so it's a fairly large not-for-profit organization. We provide training and development through a combination of things, but predominantly work skills through one of our 4 social enterprises, or life skills. And those life skills can deal with anything that a client may need that's recognized by one of their instructors. So we sort of tailor some of the curriculum to the needs of our clients. We've been in operation for 41 years. We have a waiting list in the city of at least 50 families, and I say families because when an adult with an intellectual challenge does not have a program to go to after they're out of school, that may mean that person is sitting at home. And oftentimes it certainly means their development is being challenged or not being as optimal as it could be. And one of the parents, typically the mother, stays home. So think of what that does to the economy. So in this city, we have the largest wait list of all of this province, and that's our #1 challenge. And that's a little bit about Prescott. Thank you.
Good morning. My name is Kristen Williams. I'm the president and CEO of Junior Achievement Nova Scotia. If you haven't heard of us before, we are part of a much bigger organization globally. We operate in over 120 countries. And our mission is to prepare and inspire young people to succeed in the global economy. And we do that through programs that bridge entrepreneurship, workplace readiness, and financial literacy for youth. And in Nova Scotia, we serve youth as young as 3, all the way up to 25. And we do that both in the classroom and in community. We actually partner with our friends at McPhee to deliver programs in their space, which is wonderful. Nova Scotia has been on a pretty interesting trajectory. We're one of the fastest growing charters in Canada, looking at really innovative programs both in community and in different spaces. We're currently looking at bridging entrepreneurship with STEM programming in the Discovery Centre, which should be lots of fun. We just moved to Nova Scotia Power, and we're on on campus there, exploring lots of different opportunities. And really where we see ourselves is priming that pipeline of youth to take over for the next generation, to be the next group of leaders and entrepreneurs to help drive the market economy. And many of our young people are interested in all different kinds of models of business, which we support through a network of really engaged volunteers. We engage upwards of 1,000 volunteers a year to deliver our programs. We have absolutely no frontline staff, and I'm pretty sure that puts us at the top in terms of number of volunteers that are engaged every year. And that's just a little bit about us. Thank you.
Hi, my name is Jane Davies, and I'm the Executive Director of Partners for Care. And what Partners for Care is the business enterprise arm of the Nova Scotia Health Authority in the Halifax or Central region. So I run all the businesses, so that means parking, it means retail stores, we have automated teller machines, we manage the leases of some organization businesses that are inside the hospital. So the reason I'm here is because you're saying, well, that's a business enterprise. What's she doing here? Our net proceeds go back to help patient care inside the hospital. So that's the purpose of why I get up every morning. It's a 23-year-old organization, and I just started about a year and a half ago as the executive director. And we are now in the throes of some really exciting things. We've divested of many of the social enterprises that were part of us so we could create capacity to bring new businesses inside the hospital. And you think, well, what kind of businesses? The businesses we want to bring in, we have, walking through our hospitals in Halifax and across the province, some of the busiest and stressed out people that we could possibly have in our staff and our patients and our visitors. Our mandate is to find businesses that make their life a little bit easier, to make their lives a little bit more convenient where they work, and also to generate more money so that we can help patient care. Thanks, I'm really excited to be here today.
Our next question is, how did you come to work in nonprofit? What do you how has your education and experience led you to your current position?
Okay, so answering this question, I think it goes back to being a kid. So my parents were very fortunate to have the opportunity to get involved in volunteering and organizations like Rotary and other nonprofits. So it was a really lead by example that I was very privileged to have. Not everyone has the opportunity to volunteer. And so I got involved in it quite young, and I've always kind of had that passion and curiosity about why people do what they do and why might service leadership over any other type of leadership is the right fit for me. So I started getting involved in nonprofits when I was in high school. I don't know if anyone knows the organization, Nova Scotia Secondary School Students Association, also known as NSSA, which is a student-led organization by high school students for high school students. And that really set the groundwork for me to understand what non-for-profit structure and impact and place in the community is. And then I went on to Acadia and did a recreation management degree, which really set the foundation around community development, which is a huge part of what I do every day. And understanding community needs and also individual wellness as a whole. So understanding each person having different needs and leisure behavior. And then I started at the Y on a mat leave, which I would, if you're still in school, never look past the mat leaves, because that's your in most of the time. Wasn't the best job. The title was a little bit lower than I wanted, but I might have been a little cocky, if you will, at that time. So I started as Strong Kids campaign coordinator and fundraising, and I had amazing experiences there because in a mat leave you can take on more than in just an elementary or entry-level role in a non-for-profit. And the YMCA is an amazing organization to start with. And then scooted over to Junior Achievement and worked there for 3 years, where I really got to understand this community and dig into Halifax. And then dabbled a bit into corporate. I thought it would be worth trying a little bit, and then moved back home to the nonprofit sector and was very fortunate to be brought on, and very, very lucky to be brought on with a new and upcoming charity, the McPhee Center. In that time, I also did an MBA at SMU, which I felt gave me the rounded education. The recreation side gave me the community development, understanding people's needs and the community needs, and learning how to build trust, but really understanding the foundations of finance, governance, HR, all of those things were critical for me. So I hope I've answered the question, but that's pretty much, I believe lifelong learning is important, especially in non-for-profit, as our society is always changing. So on the non-formal way, I'm always constantly trying to volunteer and give back on my own time whenever possible to learn from others as well.
Well, that was great. Made me think of my own parents, you know, because I wasn't going back that far, but when I reflect just quickly, you know, you do learn so much from your folks, and I can't say that I came into this space because of my parents, but my parents were very involved. And when something needed to get done, our line around the house was if no one does anything, nothing gets done. And I guess that makes sense now that I'm here. But it was just like if you needed something done, just create it, just do it. But I wasn't really into that space. I went to UNB, took a year of phys ed. Because I was a sport guy, I was an athlete. Good, you know, I'd like to play a variety of sports, and I knew right away that wasn't for me. And I wanted to go into business, so I switched faculties, went into business, started a sausage business, making sausages and selling them. I sold a lot of sausage. Loose European sausage, it was called, man, and if you wanted a sausage made, I could make it. And we sold thousands of sausages. And anyway, but when I graduated, I had this urge that I needed a real job. I was making more money selling sausages in the bun on a barbecue in the back of my Chevette than probably more cash then than I've probably ever had in my life. But I had this need because I've got this degree now, and I wanted a real job. So I took a job at the Herald working in marketing and selling ads, probably the lowest job in the history of the Herald. But we did well. But then the sport world kind of called to me, and I applied for a job with an organization called Special Olympics. And I didn't get it. I was second. And it burns me to this day. I remember the feeling of I thought I nailed the interview, and we'll talk about interviews a little later, but I didn't get it. And I was really disappointed because I thought I could do something really special there. And a couple months later, phone rang, and the person they hired didn't work out. So we got the job. 6 years later, I became the first president and CEO of Special Olympics Nova Scotia. And for 13 years, I had the privilege of building that organization from its infancy to I think what it is today. In 2006, we were named Sport Organization of the Year, so in Nova Scotia, competing against the hockeys and the soccers. And I think the proof is Special Olympics still rolls to this day, and it's pretty healthy. Very proud of that. I went from there, I got a job offer at St. Mary's, working internal relations, and it was a great job. It was more money, and a year and a half into it, I realized that it really wasn't for me because I wanted something bigger. Had a job opportunity at a place called the Lung Association of Nova Scotia. I was president and CEO there, and it was very much what attracted me there was a fix-up. It was a makeover kind of job, a place. They needed the new building, they needed new stuff. They had all kinds of issues, and I enjoyed that challenge. I left there about 2 years ago and took on the role at Prescott. So once you kind of get streamed, I guess, into that executive director, CEO role, you've developed, I guess, a broad enough skill set so that you can kind of fit into any organization pretty well. And it's brought me where I am today to Prescott Street, and it's the best place of all so far.
I agree with your comment about the skill set around leadership being transferable between nonprofits. I've done that myself. But like Heather, I started very young, volunteering in high school, raising money for my local library, and continued to be involved in volunteering from a very young age, all the way through university. But my first career was actually very much for-profit commercial. I worked at Canada's Wonderland for 12 years. As part of its full-time executive team, doing public relations and marketing and events, and it was a blast. absolutely a blast because I got to work with brand giants like Nickelodeon and Paramount and Viacom and CBS. So we were taking commercial brands and translating them into an experience in the park. And really what changed the course for me was starting my family. I got pregnant and I started to think about what my kids would think of their mom as, and would they be proud of me? And I realized that the sector was calling to me. So I wasn't really sure how to translate this commercial skill set into a nonprofit proposition, but so I started volunteering more intensely around leadership roles. I started doing some basic volunteer consulting for boards around public relations and marketing and communications, and found myself in a couple of leadership seats around the board table for Sickle Cell, for Hemophilia Society, for a number of organizations, and really started to understand how governance worked. All this time, I never left school. I'm still in school, actually. I'm in the middle of a PhD, just hopefully going to grind it out in the next year. We'll see what happens. So schooling has always been a go-to place for me to explore what additional value I can bring to my career. And when I finally found my opening into the nonprofit sector, it was in animal welfare. I did some graduate work at Guelph University in animal sciences, and I found myself doing marketing and PR at the Ontario SPCA, which was brilliant and fun and awesome and tear-jerking and awful at times. They do investigations into animal cruelty in addition to sheltering. So it was a really emotional mandate. And then I got headhunted to come out to Nova Scotia and lead up the Nova Scotia SPCA, which I was there for 4 years, and proud to say that we became the leading province with the most commitment of government funding. We opened the first low-cost spay-neuter clinic here in Canada, and we were the first province to commit to a no-kill strategy. So really enjoyed that. And then I got tapped on the shoulder to lead JA. But I agree that my leadership skills translated exceptionally well from an animal welfare mandate to children. The learning curve was really around, well, what does JA do and how can I help JA? So my PhD's in management. My undergrad is in cultural studies. My master's is in interdisciplinary studies. There's lots of connections and there's no connections. But I do think education is a brilliant way to find out how you can make links to the nonprofit sector. And there's many times where I was doing projects in my coursework that I took my work into the coursework and then used that out in the field. So, thanks.
I'm about to sound like an advertisement, and it really is very genuine. I had a different answer for that question when I was preparing yesterday, but in this room is where I took most of my public relations courses. I graduated long before most of you were born. And this is the room, and this is the place, and these are the pearls that I wore when I walked across the stage when I graduated in a couple of feet away. When I realized that the course that I was taking was bringing me the opportunity to do just about anything I wanted to do. And I have had a very varied career. I don't think I've actually been driving the bus. I just went around and found some things that were fun and had social purpose. This is my first real nonprofit job, if you will. Having said that, I placated because I'm running businesses. I've worked for major life insurance companies, which really their purpose in life was to protect people in times of trouble, but they also were there to make money, and most of that money went down south to Boston because it was owned by an American company. But I always found the social jobs, if you will, the community outreach programs in any program, any job that I've ever had. So it really was here at Mount St. Vincent. This institution is what set me off to do just about anything I wanted. And I'm really proud of that. And I feel really emotional right now. But thank you for asking the question. I'm glad this is in this room. It's got great energy.
So what do you like about your work, and what do you find the most challenging?
I like how you took the dislike part out, the part of the question. I wasn't going to answer that one. I'm assuming you want me to go first. Okay, great. I just jumped in. So I think for me, one of the biggest things I've always enjoyed is building connections with other people and organizations and causes and missions. So what's tied me in throughout my younger career at the moment is how many people we can engage and get on board with the mission of the McPhee Center. And everyone has something to contribute to the society, and trying to support what other people are trying to find and how to do that all together has been quite wonderful. And that's something I think any charity or nonprofit experience would give you, because nonprofits really speak to the whole community engagement part is so critical. So that's something I enjoy doing. And be it a politician or someone who's lived in Dartmouth North for 35 years of their life and are wondering why I'm coming in asking for their help, it's seeing everyone in the same playing field and understanding everyone has different assets and attributes to bring. That's something I very much like to do. And then the other thing that, when I was thinking of answering this question, is building things. So the idea of creating something or taking something, and kind of speaking to what you've said, taking something from where it was and where it is right now and bringing it up here. And you can see that echoed in Kristen's career as well. Seeing something that you can add value to. And I like to think of adding value as being one of the most important things we can do in our worlds, in our lives. And, I break down every day as, am I wasting time? Am I value enabling time in terms of, am I doing activities that will add value later, or am I doing value added work now? And that's something that is so critical to think about from the operational or strategic perspective, but more on from a personal level. That's something I look for. And what do I find most challenging? I think probably all of us can probably agree, but not to speak for anyone, is resources. So be that human resources, volunteers, staff, getting the right people in the room to make the decisions that are needed. A nonprofit, we may be all in leadership roles, but we do not decide what at the end of the day, what the nonprofit or the organization does. It's really bringing the right people in the room and surrounding yourself with people that have different unique ideas and perspectives that can take that organization and mission to the next level. And that's something I would rather look at as an opportunity, because you need to find those folks and find those passionate folks in the room, be it staff or volunteer or otherwise. And then that also translates to donors as well. So folks who fund the organizations, and what that looks like as well in terms of finding the right resources. Are you opening creating a social enterprise model for the benefit of generating funds, or a business? So for the YMCA, for example, the gym is very much a revenue generation for moving the mission along, but also donors and understanding where they sit and how to keep them moving along with you as well. So those are the things that I think are great opportunities every day, and sometimes require a lot of thought.
We have a lot of similarities for obvious reasons. I reflected on I guess some of my career path and moving from Special Olympics, a place that I loved. Like that it was home, and I was the guy. It was just such a wonderful environment. We had such a strong team right across the province, and to leave that, like why, right? Like why? And part of it was money, part of it was a new challenge. And I went to a great place. Like St. Mary's University is a vibrant culture. The international culture there is phenomenal. It's just a jewel. But after a while, I started to feel restless, and you come to grips with, well, you start, I think, getting introspective, and you start to think about what you really love to do, and what maybe you're good at. Sometimes plays in there, but what you really want to do when you grow up, kind of thing, and I realized that I like broader things. I like things of a community scope. Although SMU is big, it was a smaller campus relative to the province or a city. So I came to grips with what I really like to do. I like building teams, and I really wanted to make a difference. Like I really wanted to take a lead role and change people's lives. Like, I mean, it sounds corny, but that was me. I was into it. Whether it was coaching track and field, whether it was, I can't say selling sausages, but whether it was, Special Olympics, or whether it was the Lung Association and now Prescott, I realized that I got an immense amount of pleasure, personal pleasure, and satisfaction out of changing someone's life. And after a while, you learn that sometimes it doesn't take much to do that, and what a thrill. Like, what a gift to work in a job that you can change someone's life or save someone's life in lung health. And that's the most satisfying part of the job. At Prescott every day you walk in, and it's not Disney World every day, but boy, there's some things that you just go, wow, what a gift this is to work here. And it's not all like that. There's some real struggles, but there's a lot of good, and it's an honor. You learn after a while that it's an honor and a privilege to be involved in something that can have an effect on someone's life and a family's life, and that's really what I like most about it. Challenges. I may have a bit of a different perspective. I take a very competitive outlook to the not-for-profit sector, and I think in a healthy way. I don't care much for the old school mentality that do it that way because that's the way a not-for-profit does it. It drives me. I'm the antichrist for that. I really think that if the purpose of what we're doing is important enough, you need to be very, very competitive. You need to be passionate and driven, not just by what you say, but by what you do. And you need to surround yourself with people that aren't going to take second as something that's okay. In lung, we were dealing with people that were dying that needed a lung transplant. You want to wait? You want to take your time getting the job done? Here we have of people that are, this is where they go for 8 hours of the day. For our clients, this is where their friends meet. This is where they learn. This is where they grow. You want to wait? You want to do it half? We should be just as competitive as the Royal Bank. We should be just as competitive as politicians. We should be just as competitive as anybody and act that way. So changing that mentality that, there's not a second-rate nature that should come with a not-for-profit sector is something that I am challenged with.
So I'm going to start with the negative and end with the positive. It is an interesting sector to work in, so be prepared to be overeducated for the positions you apply for. Be prepared to enter workspaces that are predominantly female. Be prepared to get told you're not a real CEO. Get prepared to be told this is the third sector, because that's what they think. And you have to leverage power from a different position. The power you get to leverage is far more strategic. It's what Heather was talking about getting people in a room together and getting them all on the same bus and moving something forward. That's what you need to get excited about. This is an empire building. You don't get to be the one who gets all the credit. That's not what this world is about. And so you need to check your ego at the door because it doesn't belong in this sector. You're only going to succeed through the efforts of a group and a team, be it volunteers or donors or stakeholders. That's the reality. And sometimes that's a difficult pill to swallow, particularly if you are bright and you are talented and you do feel like you deserve credit, as we all sometimes do. You're going to have to seek that somewhere else. One of the things I do like, though, and one of the things I have been able to create in my workspaces is a safe space so that you can bring your whole self to work. And you can have those moments when you're frustrated. You can have those moments when you need to talk to somebody. And you need that kind of outlet in a job. So when you're out there, because this really is about you guys securing jobs in the nonprofit, be a discerning employee who's searching for the right kind of nonprofit fit for you. Culture's important. And you need to ask the right questions to make sure that you have the support you need in that environment. I love the sector for all the same reasons that these guys have mentioned. It is brilliant at times. It is a wow to be able to affect the kind of change we can affect. And it is a privilege. Absolutely, it is. It is tough sometimes to coordinate resources necessary to do what we need to do. But my goodness, I have been more surprised at the generosity of people than I have been disappointed. That's really amazing. When you see that kind of thing happen, it just blows your mind. And it makes it all worth it.
I love doing this kind of thing because I often get more out of it than I think I'm giving to it. I guess I'm learning something that I had not really sort of thought about, that I'm running businesses inside of hospitals, so I'm getting the best and maybe the worst in some places, but I'm going to say I'm getting the best of both worlds. I'm running all of my businesses like a business. But at the end of the day, what makes me get up in the morning is that money is going to go back and help patient care in Nova Scotia. But when you talk about some of the challenges that I face, I'm not a Nova Scotia Health Authority employee. Partners for Care is an independent board-governed operation. And that's the only way that I could possibly have joined this organization. Being an employee of the Nova Scotia Health Authority, I don't have the patience. I'm an entrepreneur, I'm a business lady who likes to get things done and to generate money. So that part of it I had to really come to terms with as far as my pace, my necessary, to the cultural fit that my panelists are saying is so right. I knew that I could not be, I give a great deal of honor and praise to the people inside the Nova Scotia Health Authority who have the patience to work inside a very large bureaucracy, who every day save lives. I'm happy to be on the outside of that because I'm able to be nimble, I'm able to be independent, I can make decisions. I have to get along with them, and they are my only key stakeholder, so I have to make sure I can't, for instance, to open up a candy store inside a hospital, nor would I want to, but I have to make sure what I'm doing is in lockstep with them, but it's very separate. And that was something that was really important to me when I decided to do this. But there are challenges inside of government, which, government is, again, another sector that Kristen was speaking about. You have to know whether you can fit. Having said that, at your stage of your career, take every opportunity, take every advantage of every opportunity to have fun. Try a bunch of things out. And this is great that you can start to think in your career of being nonprofit, but think about how that might actually play out in your career. But again, I had a lot of fun. I'm proudly 57 years old. I've had a lot of fun in my career. I am nowhere near finished. And I really don't know if I was driving the bus, but I just had some great opportunities. So challenges, bureaucracies. Opportunities, run it like a business.
So our next question is, what are the challenges leaders are facing in the nonprofit industry?
So I think this one kind of feeds into the one we just spoke about. However, as everyone was talking, I was jotting down some notes of things that, especially when I first started in leadership, I would say at McPhee versus a program manager or a supervisor or things like that. As a leader, I look at it as an hourglass sometimes. So you have your board of directors and you have folks who govern the organization, and then you have your operations. And as a leader, you sit in the middle and you funnel everything up and down and really try to define, distill, communicate things in a way that board members and folks who aren't always in the organization all the time can understand, and then distilling information from their responses to staff and volunteers that are on the ground. That role, specifically in my first year as ED at McPhee, was very lonely, super lonely. And in the sense that you don't always tell your board everything, you don't always tell your staff and volunteers everything, and you hold on to all that information. And when you have trusting allies, maybe colleagues in the sector, or folks that maybe if you have a very comfortable relationship with your chair, like I have the privilege to have, you have that support. And it's not always a negative thing. It's just what you do with that information and how you cope or find coping skills to work with that information. On the flip side of it, the one challenge I have is ensuring we're sticking to our mission. So the McPhee Center is a fairly young organization. Not many people know about us yet. That's one of our main goals for 18-19 is, can every household say, oh, I know what the McPhee Center is. So that's something we're working on. It's a very large goal, but how do we do that? We do that through marketing, storytelling, so on and so forth. But it's also super difficult to not creep from what your end line or what your vision and what your mission is that's directing you there. As a newer organization, that's something that I find very difficult, specifically when you have very energetic staff that are on board for the cause. How do we ensure that we're staying in line and staying on our course, or staying with our strategic plan, and being okay with saying no sometimes, which is very difficult as well, as we know in our own personal lives, but then thinking about all the other elements of board of directors ideas, staff and volunteer ideas, and understanding that you constantly have to be looking out of the fishbowl and in the fishbowl at the same time. The other thing I think leaders are facing in the nonprofit, two more things. One is, as a newer organization, or as an organization, and I'm sure there's a few folks that can think of this, is really an attention to systems and processes and understanding how things work in an organization, and how might, by spending time at the forefront and doing things right the first time, you can do more later. So the flywheel turns faster and faster the more we have our systems and our processes and our house is clean, if you will. So that could be finances, that could be how we hire people, that could be how we recruit youth, how we hire facilitators to teach our programs. Having that down has made a huge difference, and we're unique in that way, whereas we've spent a lot of time on the forefront and systems and processes, much like a business would. But that's not always common in non-for-profit. Sometimes our houses are messy. So that's something that we have found success. And again, the flywheel is moving faster and faster. And then lastly, from a leader perspective in the nonprofit, is ensuring there's time, and I would say this is for anyone really, because the money isn't always there, but ensuring you make space for professional development and learning. So for me, I have a love for lifelong learning, and I'm going to do that whether my organization empowers me to do so or not, which they do, but if I was in another organization. But consistently focusing on how could you benefit from professional development opportunities that would set you apart, make you diversified enough so you can take on further leadership roles. And that may be a volunteer gig versus a work gig. That may be formal education or going to a session like this. But it's looking at how do you better yourself consistently, but also making space for it, which it can be very much put on the back burner if you're supporting other people all the time.
Again, we live a similar life. In my current world, it's a bit of a change. We're at a time of change where the organization had some consistent leadership for several decades. There wasn't a lot of personnel change, and so too there wasn't a lot of strategic planning change and direction. So a bit of a different time. And when you're in a time of change, getting all the players on board and focused in the same way is certainly a challenge. We spoke about the board dynamic, and it's really an interesting part of a not-for-profit world that it's important that people understand the governance model right off the bat in order to make the best of it. There's like I don't know what I'd call it, it's like a power imbalance where the staff tends to know and be responsible for doing, but yet a board who may be 1 or 2 hours a month involved does have a final say when it comes to strategic plan, budgeting, and sort of the measurement of. So it's important to understand how you work that best. And one of the key roles is planning and making sure that there is a focus, that it's well stated, and that everybody's on the same page heading in the same direction, or else conflict is inevitable. So focus is a big thing. One of the, I think, things that I'm experiencing, and again, we have 41 staff, so HR and recruitment is a challenge. And in the last year, it's not as easy to hire people and to find good talent. You really have to sell the organization to find that talent. So it's a real challenge that I'm facing. Sometimes we nail it. Almost the first person you meet is just perfect, but other times it's not so. And then there's the challenge we're faced with historical rates of compensation, which in the city it's a little bit different than Digby or Cape Breton or what have you. There are different demands and expectations in this marketplace, which makes it challenging. And the reason I mention the other locations is because in some places across the province and sectors, there's an expected wage rate per position. So if we're paying the same amount of money that we're paying in Halifax as we are in a smaller centre, we're certainly at probably a competitive disadvantage. So that's a challenge of today that is pretty important, because if you don't have talent, you're limited off the get-go. It might be a little bit of an employee's market right now, a job searchers, a seekers market right now, in my opinion. Yeah. So be picky. Make sure you're going after the job that you want, and because maybe it's out there.
Trying to figure where I can add some value to what has already been shared, because it's really, it is a lot of the same thing. I do also believe it is the market for employees right now. One of my biggest challenges at JA is actually retaining talent, because I think we can be competitive on a lot of levels in terms of other benefits, but as it relates to just core salary, it's tough. It's very, very tough. And there's a lot behind that I could spend days and hours talking about, but I won't. We also have a real attitude problem in the nonprofit in terms of not defending the right for a competitive salary, and then layering on gender. It's a mess. So yeah, that's problematic. I think that mission drift is problematic, fear of missing out, in terms of all the things you could be doing, all the things that your mission could accomplish. We had a wait list of over 3,000 students last year that we didn't get to. It's just brutal. And there's lots of wonderful things that you can be doing. So having that, creating that alignment that comes from a plan that Lewis and Heather were talking about is really difficult work. And sometimes you get very frustrated with the fact that you're working on that stuff instead of doing the work that actually you feel the mission accomplishment around. And as leaders, you're more distant from that frontline work. And so it becomes frustrating a little bit. You resent having to do that work, but it's necessary if the team, your volunteers, your frontline staff can actually get out there and help kids. The other thing I think it's important to mention is that, we talk about change as though it's something that's transient. It's not. In the nonprofit sector, my experience has been every year is a change year. It's like a constant state of having to troubleshoot and pivot and be nimble, as you talked about. So be prepared for that. There's some excitement that comes from that, in the sense that it's always different, always changing. But it's also difficult to do the real work of building some of these systems that Heather spoke about, because the organization's constantly shifting. And I think that's not only true of the nonprofit sector. I quite frankly think that's true of all spaces in organizations right now. So be prepared for that. Be prepared. The workforce of the future is interesting indeed. And in our sector, I think it will be even more so.
So now I know why they left the senior to be the last one to talk. Theoretically, I've got a deeper bench of experience because everything they said is very true. But I will ring another advertisement for a course that Heidi mentioned, that there's a governance course, and that could not be more important in nonprofit. And I used to be somebody who was sort of a rebel. Like, really, do we need that many rules and regulations? Well, guess what? I'm stewarding $7 million a year going through my bank accounts, and that's public money. That's money that people paid to park. So yeah, governance is really important, and it should be a CEO's best friend to make sure we get governance right and to not be afraid of it. Just look at some of the examples that have been in the media over the last year and a half of people losing their jobs because they didn't follow governance or they didn't have the proper governance in place. So I think the biggest challenge would be to not have governance and not to understand that it is a good thing, and it protects everyone, to make sure that we're accountable, we're stewarding, whether it's people or money, and we're making sure that we're held accountable as leaders. So that will be the one thing I'd like to emphasize.
So we're going to skip around just a bit because you talked about it being like an employee market. And so what are some tips you would give to students in preparing their resumes, their cover letters, or job applications for positions available during in the nonprofit sector, as well as what do you suggest, like tips and tricks for preparing for the interview process, and what might this look like in your organization?
Such a loaded question. I would say grab any resource you can. So when I was at Acadia, my 4th year, I knew I was looking for a job. I like the nonprofit, but I was moving to a new city. Could have moved anywhere at that point, though, like, the world is my oyster at 4th year. But the big thing is just be prepared. So anyone willing to help you, any poster that's outside in the hallway saying need help on your resume, do it. I spent my 4th year spring break applying to things. I did not go on a beach. I did not celebrate. I spent time, and I was the only one to get hired in my class after graduating in a career that wasn't that was pertaining to our degree. So not to say what I did will get everyone there, but just that idea of really taking in as much advice. If you can go for coffee with profs or anyone that you may know that you have an interest in their career path, or just even asking the question, how'd you get here? And is there anyone else you'd introduce me to? That has helped me every step of the way. So not being afraid to ask for help. That's a common misconception in our world is that asking for help is a weakness, and it's time and time again for me been a huge benefit to getting me to the next step. People want to help if you think about it. In terms of do's and don'ts for interview process, I would just show up as confidently and as secure of yourself, and knowing your background and knowing your education and knowing that it has so much value and you've put a ton of work into it. And I think being prepared as well. So we have this wonderful thing called the internet, where you can look up every question you may ever find in an interview. You can do YouTube videos, you can do tutorials. There's no excuse nowadays to show up in an interview not ready or having the answers to your education and your experience and how it applies to the job. When it comes to resumes and cover letters, they give you a description for a reason. So that's what they're looking for. And we spend a lot of time building these descriptions because that's what we're looking for. And that allows you to be picky. Like they say, it is an employee's, you can choose what you want to do a lot more than it has been in the past. Really educate yourself around that job description. Sometimes those things disappear. So if you can screenshot them as soon as possible, because sometimes when you get an interview, the job description is nowhere to be found. And you're like, oh no. Okay. So think of those little things that can grab as much information you can. And ensure that what you are saying about yourself correlates with that role. That's the simplest advice I can give you. And just be ready. And be excited about it.
This is my favorite question, my absolute favorite question. At Prescott, we, with larger staff, we interview people frequently, And although we have an HR manager, I'm intimately involved in all of them because I think building the team is the base. So I invest a fair amount of time in the process. I take it incredibly seriously. Heather mentioned about the job description. Well, there's a lot of time put into it. We wordsmith it. Every word we go over, it's purposeful, very purposeful. The answers are usually there. But I've seen so many terrible interviews recently, awful, and some from this school. No. Just, yeah, absolutely. Some from Dell, some from, you know what?
Some from Acadia.
And in this day and age of YouTube, where you can go on and get the best information you can, there's no excuse. Here's a couple of tips from my perspective. We work in the not-for-profit world. If you have any interest in this world, I would volunteer. I would get yourself involved in the community in some way. And there's a big difference between volunteering for the Red Cross, taking stamps at the door, and leading a committee. Okay? Leading the committee, leading anything, creating something, bringing value that you can say, I did this. We is good. But during that interview, I'm not talking to we, I'm talking to you. And I want to know what you've brought to the table, and I will ask. So you might have written it as, during my time at the, I'm going to ask you, what did you do? What value did you bring? All you have to do is stack the deck. Do some things in those volunteer roles that are of value and that you can transfer to my needs. Because during the interview, I'm trying to solve my problem. And that's fill my team with the best person. So if you want the job, answer the question as to how you're going to solve my problems. And if you don't know from the job description, pick up the phone, call somebody at Prescott or wherever, and say, listen, my name is so-and-so, I'm from the Mount. I am thrilled, so excited to be applying for this job. You're now talking to someone from Prescott, and you're a new young professional looking for, and you're saying that I'm so interested in Prescott. Right away, you're getting their attention. You're getting their respect. Is there anything that you could share with me? I have a couple of questions. One good question is, what would be the 2 or 3 major accomplishments or major skills that you want, that you need? Or is there 10 minutes that I can get with whoever I'd be working for? I have never said no in my life to that request. Ever. Some recent graduate takes the initiative to phone me up and ask me for an interview so they can prepare for their interview. They're going to get an hour of my time. They're going to get more answers than they can think of, and right away they're getting an interview if they just applied.
I'm so glad you said that, because that's one of their projects.
It's simply called initiative. I had a gal from Mount St. Vincent 2 weeks ago. She was interviewed, top 3. And almost at the end of the interview, she mentioned that she was going on a Girl Guide weekend camping trip. It just slipped. Well, I love Girl Guides. My daughter is a Girl Guide. For the next 10 minutes, we talked nothing about Girl Guides and what she did in her leadership role in Girl Guides. And how did she get to that leadership role? I forgot all about what school she went to. This woman gives hours of her week to build my daughter. I love that. You know, I mean, what more? So it's making those connections, and you don't know. One thing you know in this sector, we all value people that give of their time to others. That's a given. Just do it. Just do it. And think about the transferable skills. Mm-hmm. And direct them, connect them directly to what's in that job description. The answers are there. And if you can't figure that out, you're not very creative. But if you can figure it out, you're going to get the job. There's no question. Volunteer and talk about it. Think about what you've done in a leadership role. Make sure that that's connected to the job. It really will resonate with anybody, I think, on this panel. Yeah.
So I've done a lot of interviews over the years, and yeah, there are definitely good ways to go about interviews and bad ways to go about interviews. And there's things that people think they need to say at interviews that they don't, or they need to say it differently. So I used to, when I interviewed for the SPCA, or was interviewing rather staff for the SPCA, people go out of their way to tell me they loved animals. I kind of think that's a given. I hope to God you love animals. But it's really about being strategic with that answer. And one of the ways you do that is you find out a little bit more. And there are lots of tools. Yes, go to the website of the nonprofit you're interested. Find out what they're doing. Hopefully they have a good website where they've maybe shared some really interesting information about their strategy. You can go online and look through the Charities Directorate. You can get the financial records of a nonprofit. I would say that's a very good homework assignment for you to do because you want to understand the financial health of the organization. In terms of the volunteer skills that I think are the most valuable, if you can say, I've had experience managing volunteers and I've had experience raising money, big for me, absolutely. Because honestly, no matter what position you work in an organization, in a nonprofit, undoubtedly, those skills would contribute to the overall health of the organization and its success. So go find ways to raise money and go find ways to manage volunteers. You'll get to do that if you have the opportunity to volunteer in a governance type role, which is what Lewis was talking about in terms of managing a committee. But a lot of boards love to have youth perspectives on their board. So you can actually make a contribution as a sitting board member. I have a sitting space for an alumni on my board, and she's just a recent graduate. And it's not only is she getting oodles of experience, but we are seeing her representative of the youth we serve inside and around the board table. So those are very, very helpful. So do your homework. Some of the soft skills that I think that people forget, you're obviously going to come to an interview with a lot of hard skills. You'll have studied very hard at school. Maybe you have some other career experience, and maybe you volunteered. Your people skills are going to take you so much further than you know. Being able to relate to people, being able to establish relationships, being persuasive, these are very, very important skills. And so take time to develop them. And you will not be disappointed in terms of how they serve you.
Okay, I've tried to keep my answers really short because I'm last, but I'm going to take the license of telling a story right now. First of all, the first thing you need to do is do a cover letter. I am in the throes right now in the market hiring a director. This is a senior level position. I posted last week, I've seen about 50 resumes come through. 2 had cover letters. So apparently everybody else is looking for me to make the connectivity of why this person is the best person for the job. And I've mentioned it to a few people and they went, oh, cover letters isn't a thing. Well, here's the thing. If you want to come work for me, you better do a cover letter. And make the connection. Sell yourself. This is a business development role. And if they can't sell themselves to me, then we're not having a conversation. Before I tell the story, don't forget at the end of the interview, ask for the job. So many people forget to ask for the job when they leave the interview. Thank you very much. I'm very interested in this job. I hope you will consider me for this job. Really simple. Guarantee you, it's the one thing I hope you remember that I've said today. But let me tell you my little bit of a story. So I'm 35 years old. I've been laid off from an advertising agency. I've got 2 kids, a mortgage, and a car payments. And the place that I wanted to work was called Maritime Life. And it was, I mentioned it before, it was one of the top employers across Canada. My sister had worked there, and it was Maritime Life this and Maritime Life that. And I thought, I want to go work there. And they didn't have any PR departments. So I was like, okay, I guess I'll have to wait it out. I went to an event one night, and I met Ed McHugh. And if you guys don't know him, you need to know him. Anyways, he basically, and I talked, and he was running the PR department for Maritime Life. I was like, this is it. So I called him the next day and I said, Ed, it's Jane. We met yesterday at the reception. He said, yeah, it was great to meet you. I said, look, I'm going to come work for you, so we probably should set up an interview. And he, of course, being Ed, said, sure, come on in tomorrow. So I went in, brought my resume, and I said to him, there's my resume. You tell me what's not on it. I'm going to go get it, and then I'm going to come back because this is where I'm going to work and this is where I'm going to succeed. And he looked at my resume and he said, you've got everything I need. And I said, great. He said, except for one thing. I said, what's that? He goes, I don't have any money. I have no job. I went, well, that sucks to be me, doesn't it? So anyways, I went home. I talked to my husband, who I'm still with, and 35 years. And I went home and I talked to him. I called Dad the next day. I said, here's the deal. I'm coming to work for you for free for 2 months. And if at the end of the 2 months you don't like what you see, then I've given my dream a shot. If you like what you see, I go on a payroll. I had 10 years of some of the most amazing professional experiences because I was willing at 35 years old with 10 years experience to get down on the floor and wrap presents, whatever it took to make that department successful. And that would be the best advice that I could ever give you, other than ask for the job at the end of the interview. There, I won't be this long again, I promise.
That's okay. So we're going to open up the floor to some student questions. What's going to happen is you're going to ask your question, and then I'm going to have to repeat. Oh, do we have a microphone? Yes, we do. Oh, perfect. Then I don't. I'm going to bring around the microphone to you, and then you can ask your question directly to the panelists.
I know. I see what you said, but I knew you knew. Can I add what when Heather was talking about when you go online and look for questions and you can be fully prepared and locked and loaded when you get to the interview. That happened one time. I was interviewing somebody and he had this really great question. I love questions, right? Anyways, I said, that's a really good question. His response, yeah, I found it on the internet last night. Take the credit.
Don't.
Take the credit. Don't tell me you did that.
Hi, my name is Epiphany, and I'm in the Nonprofit Leadership Program here. And one of the things we've talked about in kind of a few different classes, but it comes down to kind of an organizational fit and role fit, and when you're making like personnel decisions about that. And my sense is that in the nonprofit sector, that the organizational fit would maybe have a higher weight compared to not like the for-profit sector. But I was just wondering, like from your experience, would you take someone who maybe didn't have like all of the minimum requirements, but you thought had a lot of capacity to grow with the organization and be a good fit to culture?
Yes. No, it's simple. I actually think it's probably 50-50. The person fit is crucial. And it really has a lot to do with the fact that you're going to be doing a lot of group-related teamwork type activity in the nonprofit. You're going to need to be flexible and versatile, and it's important that you know how to work with different people. So the chemistry and the cohesiveness within the team is mission critical, and you need somebody that's going to be able to fit in. And honestly, I can train you to do a lot of different things. I can't train fit.
Or attitude.
Or attitude, yeah, no kidding. Yeah, absolutely.
Okay, thank you.
I think with that, just if I could pipe in, I run a very small charity. So when you are putting resources behind things, that 50-50 is critical, because I think if you're 60-40 and you really need that resource and that person to support what they're doing, I think fit is super important in terms of culture and creating that culture, especially from a smaller organization perspective that hasn't been around that long. But that, I guess, the skills and attributes and the knowledge is still very much important. So it's, for me, it sounds kind of silly, but it's not an excuse if that isn't there. It's not an excuse if the job isn't done at the end of the day, and you deal with that lightheartedly and in a very culturally minded way, but also ensuring that you have the right people in the room at the same time, and ultimately you want to achieve that over time and through support. And generally a nonprofit, you get a lot of energy and passion towards what you're doing, and that's exciting. It's ensuring that the skills are still there as well.
Hi, so my name is Asanitu. So I'm a third-year accounting student here. So my question is, so from your experience, so you did mention as well that a lot of the positions in nonprofit actually when you start working it, so it actually demands more than you have applied for, more skills and more knowledge than you might not have. So would you say that it might be better to start working elsewhere than what is your goal, to actually earn and have experience before going in the position that you want, your goal position, to have the a success in that role?
That's a good question. I wouldn't wait personally. I think one thing that I would do is take advantage of volunteer opportunities that you have to fill out your skill set. You might be an accountant, but you might volunteer and be engaged in fund development or some sort of team building or program development role, which could make you more than just the accountant. And Kristen mentioned earlier the fact that almost everybody is involved in a team dynamic or fund development, and you'd want to be involved. You'd want to have some experience and a willingness to participate in both of those things, regardless of your role. But I think you can get added skills through volunteer work just as easy as it would be taking 3 or 4 years to build up. I would jump into what I'd want to do, quite frankly.
I'd also say that accounting and finance is a big asset in non-for-profit, so kudos for you being here, because there was a question about what experience and skill set or education do you need to be in this sector, in a leadership role, whatever, and finance is like king in so many ways. It's not the thing that's always talked about, but it's not as fluffy, it's not as feel warm, and hopefully it's not. So there's no creativity around it either. But that idea of jumping in, why not? Just run it like you said. There's no harm in just diving in and seeing what happens.
I would suggest you look for an opportunity to join a finance committee, or even maybe be a junior treasurer role. That is going to give you experience around policy. It's going to give you leadership experience. It's going to get you exposure to governance. And those are tremendous assets. And trust me, a finance acumen in a nonprofit setting is brilliant.
My name's Hillary, and I'm also in part of the nonprofit leadership program. So I really like hearing the sort of origin story, because everyone has this sort of circuitous route to where they're going. So growing up, I always thought, when you're 10 years old, you know you're going to be a firefighter, and you just kind of go for it. And so I'm in my 3rd time at school doing a career transition, and it was really intimidating coming back at 30 and being like you said, trying to figure out what you want to be when you grow up. So I like hearing that there was never just for everyone this linear path. And so it makes me feel better knowing that these maybe soft skills can transfer. But does that mean that movement is sort of the norm in the nonprofit world? Do you not stay anywhere too long? Or is it do you outgrow a position, or does an organization outgrow you and you should keep moving, or is it all situational dependent?
So a lot of that. Sometimes in the nonprofit sector, it can get hard to climb the same mountain year after year. It's emotionally exhausting. You don't feel you maybe are contributing anymore. I've resolved that 2 different ways in my career so far. So I resolved that with respect to leaving the SPCA and joining JA. So I did leave. I've been now at JA for 6 years. And instead of leaving this time, I hired a COO, and I'm now managing specific specialty programs that I'm really interested in. So anything that's new and innovative have sort of rest with me. So I've kind of, I'm still there coaching the senior management team. I'm still there liaising with the board, but my portfolio is much different. And that gave my board the opportunity to maintain my leadership skills while also developing a 2IC that secures the future of the organization. So it actually benefited. So all that to say, I think there are many ways that you can remain long-term within a nonprofit. But the compassion fatigue, and maybe you've talked about that already, is a real thing, certainly within certain mandates within the nonprofit sector, and something to be mindful of. I also think that now that we are finding more leadership coming from the commercial sector or the for-profit sector into the nonprofit sector, that kind of mobility is being transferred into our sector. So it used to be that, you know, maybe you were a social worker and then you became an AD and that you were there for 35 years. Now that's not the case. Not to say you should leave. I have employees that have been with me for 18 years. So yeah, really depends.
I think there's sometimes there's a value of having some transition. I joined a place, 40 staff. I had 11 that were over 25 years. I think 30 were over 10 years. And that gave me a gift of knowledge, of corporate knowledge, but perhaps you can get locked into an old way of doing things. So there's a bit of a balance there. From a personal standpoint, I know I've had two roles that were immensely satisfying and in every way, but for me it just was time. You know, I wanted to move on, and sometimes you can feel both ways. Like it's good to stay fresh, but that's very much dependent on the circumstance and the situation. I've seen people have long careers with one organization, and it's been very good. Others that have done the opposite.
I think with transition, sometimes it's not always in your control either. So taking a look what else is going on in your life or circumstances within the organization that cause you to no longer exist there for the time. And knowing that you want to have control as much as you can, but knowing that that is a learning experience as well. Be it you're transitioning from a different sector to nonprofit or whatever it may be, always trying to look at those as learning experiences that will help in the future, I think is important. And I kind of look at them as lily pads. So for me, my first role in nonprofit, I could have very well stayed in that organization and moved up, and because it was a big enough non-for-profit or charity in our community. But it wasn't a good fit at the time. So I moved over to a new lily pad and took that on and took a different role and then tried another lily pad. So it's not always, I guess it's to each their own in so many ways. And it's not always something you can foresee, but if you're being challenged and learning and growing as an individual in your role and you can see progression, I say, like it's to each their own and what fits you.
Can I just add one thing? Mm-hmm. Sometimes people leave for money, right? Sometimes you leave for money. You want more money. The difference between craft dinner and steak gets really evident, you know, and sometimes we want more. So, like, I don't want...
all the steak.
I don't want it to be, or sushi, I don't want anyone to think that you can make a good living in the not-for-profit sector. You can make quite a good living, a very stable living, a very satisfying living. And it's okay to want more money. You don't have to be Mother Teresa and think you're going to work for nothing. That's not the reality, and if that's the case, I wouldn't work in that organization. I think there's opportunities, like you think of what Jane did. She worked for free, proved her value, and suddenly there was enough money to satisfy her needs. Sometimes you can start at one level and build it up and create more value. I'll tell you, if I have a staff that I know is just a great part of our team, and I know that they need more, I'm going to offer it to them before they're asking. But boy, if they're asking and it becomes evident to me, I'm going to try to find a way to keep them. You don't need to be poor in the not-for-profit sector. You can have a solid living, but the key to that is bringing value to the table, and a good executive director or president CEO will find the resources to keep you if at all possible. Yeah.
So this is going to conclude our panel today, so we'd like to give a round of applause to thank our panelists for being here. If you do want your learning passport stamped, you can fill out the survey, and then Miriam and I will stamp them for you.